सो हम लोग इंट्रोड्यूस करेंगे सबको एक दूसरे के साथ में.
Okay.
So
I think we should begin, right?
right. So I think Amit, if Amit you're there, so we could begin.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. A very good welcome to Dr. Desai, and thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and taking some time out of your busy schedule. I'm Amit Bose. I'm one of the co-founders of Emotionally, and we have each other. We have here with us all the co-founders of Emotionally. There's Ina Bilka, who is a co-founder. Ina is there on the screen. And there is Anita Milani, who is also a co-founder. Of course, there's with Dr. Desai today. There's Rajiv Kumar, who is in San Diego, and it's about 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning his time. And he is not able to join us here. And there's Niloufar Ibrahim, who is not put on a video for some reason, and she is also here with us. So there are 6 of us co-founders. Plus, we have a very large team of experienced counselors and coaches with us. And just to talk to you briefly about Emotionally, we are an online platform and we provide both individual and group counseling. We provide hotline services to corporates. Then we do what we call emotional first aid training for companies, where we train HR teams and line managers to help their colleagues, etc., in the company. We do emotional health service for organizations, as well as what we help organizations to do emotional awareness campaigns. Plus, we do coaching, both leadership coaching as well as management coaching on different subjects. So that's what we do. We are a young company, but between all of us co-founders and all the team members, I think once counted, we had about 300 years of experience. And I think between everybody, they have treated and helped about 300,000 people all over the world. So that's where we are. And now, to Dr. Kumar and Dr. Desai. And for the sake of bandwidth, I am going to go off video right now. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up later in the call.
So I'm going to request everybody, I'm Dr. Roma Kumar. I'm going to request everybody to please switch off your videos and put yourself on mute because it interferes with the bandwidth, and we're going to begin the entire show today. Once again, I welcome Dr. Nimesh Desai, and he's very special to me in many ways because we've shared a lot of platforms together, and it's my proud privilege to introduce him to everyone. I'm sure everybody knows him, but Dr. Nimesh Desai has made immense contribution to the development of Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences, that's IBHAS in Delhi. And he's an eminent psychiatrist and also the director at IBHAS. And he's achieved the status of Institute of National Level Prominence, which is excellent, sir. He's made exceptional and unusual decision of shifting back to IBHAS after a while, and he's been there for quite some time. He's been at NIMHANS for 6 years from 1982 to 1988, at AIIMS Delhi for 10 years from 1988 to 1998. He's led significant landmarks for the Institute via getting the Institute a lot of accreditation. And of course, he's got many researches to his credit and a lot of awards that he's got. I would not want to go on and on because that list is endless. And there's a lot that Dr. Desai has actually achieved everywhere. So thank you, Dr. Desai, for being here with us.
Thank you, Roma, for having me. Really. I was going to say to your colleague that as much as I know of you, and if all of them co-founders are as smart and capable as you are, then I think you have a great combination there. Six of
Thank you.
such-
Thank you so much, sir. So let me begin by, we know that we've gone through this pandemic for quite some time, and the COVID has actually stuck us globally at, at a very large level. So we understand that the emotional and mental health issues are quite a bit there. So what action should be taken to address this situation? And I would just like to know, what are your views, and is India capable of dealing with this situation?
Um, I think so. I am very confident that India, society as a society and as a nation, is more than capable of handling the situation. For a few reasons, mostly guided by past research, some amount of gut or intuitive feeling. As you know, Baromaji, there is this gradation of mental health issues or emotional problems that we need to identify. At one end of the spectrum is the diagnosable, worthy of treatment psychiatric disorders or mental disorders. And then there is what is often been called, and we have termed as subsyndromal mental health problems. There are significant symptoms, headache or insomnia or irritability or the like, but it doesn't qualify to be a psychiatric disorder. And yet that one or two set of symptoms is causing distress, discomfort, dysfunction in person's life. The third is then the stress of day-to-day life or the day-to-day anxieties. And fourth is then, if at all there are some people there, the so-called normals. Now, the thing that happens in such situations, and we know this from a lot of our own research and other research in India and outside, is that the locus shifts towards the left. Towards the right. And so there is virtually no one who can claim to be free of emotional disturbance. Like we found, and very briefly, let me try and describe this. In Bhuj and Kutch, we found within the first few weeks of the earthquake, almost everyone there, including the physicians, the surgeons, the one lone psychiatrist who happened to be in that area at that point of time, had classical obsessions. They will not enter the building of their own home. They might at best go and have a quick shower and come out.
Yeah.
They might cook a quick dish and come out and sit and eat. They will not sleep there at night. I mean, they knew it was irrational. They knew they could not control it. They knew it was repetitive. And so we debated a lot amongst our teams and the Gujarat government teams and say, should they be considered as OCD cases and given medication or treatment? And then we said to ourselves, let's not do that. Let's support them. Let's give them the correct reality. Within a few weeks, majority of them got better.
Yeah, yeah.
Same experience we saw in tsunami in Tamil Nadu. The fishermen would not venture to the sea. The wives will not let them go to the sea because they had the fear of another wave. So phobic symptoms, obsessive symptoms, or merely as in this pandemic, it can happen, the fear or the anxiety of getting infected and the isolation of lockdown. These are almost universal. And so there is almost none of us who can claim to be normal. Even otherwise, very few people can claim to be normal, as we say. But certainly in this period, no normalcy. The crucial part of this is that the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, put together a working group in 2007 or 8 and came up with the national guidelines for psychosocial support and mental health services in disaster, conflict, epidemic situations. And what we all agreed was the important part of how every reaction that you see, emotional, behavioral, interpersonal, be first seen as a normal reaction to a grossly abnormal situation. So however grossly abnormal that reaction or behavior might seem to be on the face of it, it's good to first see the possibility that this may be a normative reaction because the situation is so grossly abnormal.
Right.
This is one side of the whole story. And so, as your questions were, is there already or is there going to be an emotional or psychological pandemic?
That's right.
Yes, surely. Is there going to be a psychiatry or mental health epidemic in terms of disorders, treatment requirement? No, I don't think so. I didn't think so in February or on 25th March. I don't think so today. The delicate part is that, as you know very well, but to share with everyone else, while we don't need to psychiatricize or psychologize unduly the normative experience of such stress, on the other hand, there are people who actually require psychosocial help, counseling, and some of them active treatment from you colleagues, some of them medication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we should not be missing out on them.
Right.
So there is the delicate balance for the society to strike, for the government policy to strike, and say, identify and provide professional help to those who need it, and urgently so. Don't psychiatricize or don't medicate or don't diagnose people too early and too soon.
Right, right, sir. So that makes a lot of sense, you know, what you have actually said, that there are going to be few or emotional areas that we need to actually address. And I think we need to actually, all of us need to be sensitized to even picking up those areas. So, you know, research, of course, reports indicate that the 40% to 60% employees suffer from emotional health issues leading to severe loss in productivity in the organizations. Yet companies are not really focusing on this. What is your opinion, you know, that what needs to be done to change the corporate mindset?
This was, I guess, always so. And like the rest of the society, in corporate sector or in business houses, I suspect, I don't think we have reliable data as yet, but this quantum and the experience of distress or psychological symptoms is as universal, if not more, than the rest of the society. One, because there was the isolation and the work from home. There were obviously pressures of working from home, or as people said, working for home.
Yeah.
And then there was, of course, the issues of livelihoods and job security.
Mm-hmm.
For the managers and for the system, keeping the balance sheet positive above the watermark. And so the pressures which were anyway higher in corporate sector and in urban living, I guess in all probability only become worse. Allow me to say something else here.
Yes.
Outside the corporate thing. We did a largish study over 5 or 7 years in Delhi, Lucknow, Chennai, focusing on urban mental health problems. And this was between 2004 to 2009 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And there also we found, besides the diagnosable work that all we did, we went to actually the community groups across strata. And we did focus group discussions and other anthropological methods. And the consistent finding across classes, across these 3 cities was, look, doc, you can worry about your diagnosable disorders of depression and alcoholism and schizophrenia and how you want treatment to reach them, very fine. But for majority of us, the major psychological or mental health issue is the stress of day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. So in 21st century world, and definitely India, the stress of day-to-day life or the urban stress, as we keep saying, was already a major issue. Yes. And now it's only perhaps become much worse. I mean, can there be, like I've said in a few webinars, can there be anyone of us who can claim to have had no psychological difficulties in one way or another? Worrying about family, isolation, fear of infection, you know. As I'm sure we'll come to more, Roma, and you and the other colleagues, I'm sure, can handle that better in this session and later. What's crucial, and that we haven't touched till now, is how do individuals better cope with it? How can families and friends support all of us, each other, to cope with it better? And can there be strategies at the society or state level for people to cope better?
Absolutely, sir. You know, because right now, as everybody is talking that there's so much of stress, and you hear anyone, everybody is talking of stress in one way or the other, or the pay cuts, or in normal conversations also there's stress. And sir, we have been on so many panels together that we are talking of anxiety and depression, and then the fear and the suicide, and all of those talks are going on. So emotional health and mental illness is still considered a very big taboo subject in India. And what would you say that, what is the status of emotional well-being in India, and how committed is India to mental health? You know, there's a lot of confusion in the mindsets of people regarding psychiatric medication, which they think is very addictive, versus psychotherapy, or even talking about it. You know, a lot of mental health people have begun asking people to talk, but what are your views on that?
Um, See, it was in the 1960s that research began to emerge from researchers in the English-speaking world, at least UK and US, uh, down in Africa, Nancy Wexler and others, who started saying that people in Asia and Africa are under-psychologized. And so unlike us, people in UK and US and Europe, who can freely, frankly express their psychological distress, you poor things, Asia and Africa, you can't express your emotional distress, and so somatic depression happens more.
Yes.
My take, Roma, from the time I have joined 40 years ago, intuitively, and I think by now I have data to suggest and argue, look guys, it's possible that we were under-psychologized and we are under-psychologized. But that might also be a strength.
Yes.
Is it not possible that you guys in the US and Europe and UK, particularly US of A, are over-psychologized? Every small experience of day-to-day life need not be individual or couple or a group, need not be psychologized, definitely not psychiatricized. As I've often said, even before all this 2020 issue, I don't think you and we have spoken about this. See, in the US, I say in a lighter vein, and with all respect to therapists and providing therapy, but psychiatrists are much worse to contribute to this. If I sneeze too often, I go to an analyst and he will analyze me for 5 years as to why I sneeze too much. That's how cheek bahut aati hai. If I don't get sneeze, another therapist will perhaps analyze me for 5 years and say, "Mujhe cheek kyun nahi aati?" See, it's actually a bit crazy as to how they seem to have over-psychologized and over-psychiatricized the society really. The simple example of that is, and very briefly for you and other colleagues and other listeners, the global figures for psychiatric disorder, the WHO put some years ago as 25%. So 1 in 4 people. Okay, so I often use this slide, used to earlier, to say 1 in 4 people, WHO says, can have a diagnosable psychiatric disorder. Please look at 3 friends around you, and if they seem normal, okay. The figures in the US by NIH studies, National Institutes of Health, are 49 to 50%.
Right.
With all respect to the American culture, and I'm neither Americophile nor a phobe, we respect each culture for its strengths and weaknesses, including psychology and psychiatry stuff. The stigma is less, to answer your question. But they have perhaps gone too far. The challenge before our society is this, again a double-edged sword. We want to increase mental health awareness so that those who require help for psychiatry or psychological issues must come forward and without hesitation seek help.
Right.
But we don't want to repeat their error of overdoing it.
Sure, sure.
Now, this is very difficult because the moment you start increasing the awareness, the public is very likely to go overboard. As I must say, is I think happening in some classes in the megalopolises. The extraordinarily westernized, exposed to the Western world, Gen X and Gen Y, I suspect is going through that experience of turning everything into a psychological or psychiatric problem. So the stigma needs to be better, sure. The other part, there can be no society where there is no stigma of people with mental disorders or disability. Okay. It's a utopian concept to have a totally inclusive society or, classless society in any sense. But yes, we must keep striving towards that. There's also another finding here, Aroma. In the urban mental health study that we did, there was another finding that we had. In Delhi, Lucknow, Chennai, sorry, I didn't complete the data set, allow me. The global figures are 25%, 1 in 4. The American figures are 1 in 2, 50%, nearly. The Indian figures are fortunately 10 to 12%.
Oh,
So in
okay.
India, the rate of psychiatric disorder is just 1 in 10.
Mhm.
Now the finding that I was talking about. Out of every 100 people in India, if there are 10 people or 12 people who have diagnosable psychiatric disorder, only 2 or 3 reach any mental health service.
Right.
What is
Absolutely.
technically called the treatment gap is 80%.
Mm.
So 8 out of 10 people never reach anywhere. Yes, we need to work towards getting these people out. What also happens in conflict, epidemic, and disaster situations is that it is these people who are in treatment gap who come forth for treatment.
Right.
And so, yes, you might possibly have inflated data at clinics and hospitals. On the one hand, you'll have a lot of people saying we are suffering, there's a stress. But neither of that needs to be confused with the rate of psychiatric disorder. What will be of tremendous interest to you, Roma, and the other mental health professional colleagues outside psychiatry is also this. Our project did a lot of work on what we called as subsyndromal mental health problems that I referred to.
Mhm.
The rate of subsyndromal mental health problems was 13 to 15% more, in addition to the 10 to 12% who had psychiatric disorder.
Mhm.
So that is where, while people with mental disorders definitely require comprehensive treatment, including medication, and medication can do wonders,
Right.
for those people, you require the clinical psychology and the counselor colleagues.
Absolutely.
So the levels of service delivery need to be recognized.
That's absolutely well said, sir. And I can see from my chat that there are lots of people already talking about your
Right.
over psychology size and psychiatry size. You know, that's a wonderful terminology that you shared with us all. That's really nice, you know. So let's take it forward that
Yes.
what should corporate India actually do to prioritize emotional health, especially because corporates are now talking of that their employees are talking that there's a lot of violence going on in the families. Children are getting completely ignored because of all the time being at home and with their online classes. And also addictions are on the rise. So what would you say? What would your message be for corporate India?
Surely the attention to oneself and one's emotional health is important. And that, unlike what I argued earlier, maybe our societies were under psychologized, and maybe we have already moved in the correct direction to recognize the psychological aspects of one's being. As long as we don't overdo it, appropriate balanced attention to one's own emotional and psychological health and those of people around would be great.
Mhm.
The trouble with rapidly transiting societies like ours is, like you are saying, the addictive substance use disorders become more, the interpersonal issues, including domestic violence or intimate personal violence, become more, the other softer problems become more. In fact, Roma, let me put this to you and the other colleagues and all of your founder colleagues. I have tried putting this to quite a few groups before 2020. I don't think I have come up with this in 2020 at any of the webinars. But as a public health professional, it's always intrigued me to ask myself and ask everyone, in history or across the globe at the current time, let's say 2020, even before 2020, was there or is there any reasonably good model of development, socio-technological and economic development, without mental health indicators going bad?
Oh, yes.
It would seem to me that there isn't.
There isn't. That's
Kerala, our own country, Kerala, the megalopolises, and of course the Western world. So frankly, that's a huge human concern issue. Are we saying that, or are we to accept that at least the model of development that the world has adopted post-World War, late 20th century, socio-technological, hedonistic, comfort-seeking, and all of that per se brings mental health problems and social indicators going down? Now, if that is so, that's a very dicey situation. I do believe there again that in general and in this current epidemic situation, we as a nation and a society actually have an opportunity, if not an obligation, to demonstrate to the world that that need not be so.
That's a good
And
one.
one may not be materially provided for very well. One may not be very well looked after in terms of what is defined as comfort, and yet one can be emotionally, psychologically sensitive and happy. Allow me to share one more data set quickly.
Yes.
And some other day maybe we'll talk about this here or elsewhere. The Supreme Court of India on 31st March took note of what bothered all of us. All those television screen images of migrant workers in megalopolises coming out on the expressways.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes.
And the Supreme Court said that, look, this is not okay. They require shelter, they require help from the state, but they also require psychological support. And so the Supreme Court asked each state to say, please ensure that volunteer or counseling support is available to them along with the police work. Okay. Few states, I think, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, this side or that, few states took it up seriously. In Delhi, we had sent out over an 8-week period about 11 teams, one in each district, of multidisciplinary mental health composition to actually talk to, work with these people who were in those temporary shelter homes. And our teams studied about 53,000 people. Okay. Now, in short, the psychiatric disorders rate and the psychological ill health, subsyndromal problem, or non-psychiatric psychological distress or symptoms.
Right.
These rates were no higher than general population.
Okay.
This is the group of people, please pause and think, ladies and gentlemen, and Roma. These are the people who were already at the lowest rung, possibly, of the social ladder. They went through a terrible experience like we all went through. Sudden lockdown, isolation, nothing is sure about whether I'll get my milk. In addition to our anxieties, they had the anxiety about having no money on hand, no cash flow.
Right, right.
And so in an impulsive act, they all got onto the expressways. The Supreme Court and the states took notice, put them in shelters, majority of them, NGOs came forward. These people, and with all the uncertainty prevailing in the months of April, May, June, when we studied, on their own or with minimal help from our teams, were able to avoid getting psychologically or psychiatrically unduly distressed.
Yes.
I mean, there can't be, to my mind, there can't be a better example and evidence for general human adaptation
The resilience.
and Indian resilience. वो जो Indian resilience है ना, वो बहुत तगड़ी है. We don't even realize. Sometimes individuals or groups are not even aware. We are not aware. We are not aware of how much pressure one can deal with because of the inherent strength that my culture and my family background gives me.
Absolutely. But we don't seem to recognize that, we kind of break apart, we don't recognize it so well. And really, thank you for actually talking about it, So also, an early identification of mental health conditions and recognition of suicidal behaviors and appropriate management through a multi-sectoral approach is important, as you've already said. In the current scenario, how do you think we can flatten this emotional distress curve that everybody is feeling, Can we really actually work on that? And how do we go about it? What are your suggestions?
My thought there is, and I was in the initial part going to talk about this. I don't know if you have ever run into one of the doyens of psychiatry in the 60s and 70s called Dr. Ravilal Kapoor.
Yes, I have.
R.L. Kapoor, right? I mean, he did landmark studies in Edinburgh, in University of Kota, in Karnataka. He was then the professor of community psychiatry at NIMHANS. He was one of the, although he didn't get enough recognition, he was one of the beginners of the community psychiatry movement and the National Mental Health Program background. Chandigarh, Raipur, Rani, Ranchi, Sambhag, the Sakalvada experience at Bangalore. And I remember when I joined NIMHANS as SR and then became faculty, he was the HOD for the initial years. He always used to say in smaller large groups and said, look, and I'm sure you and the other colleagues will appreciate this. By now we have moved 40 years later, but even now it holds. When any one of us goes into the slums or the tribal areas or the rural areas, and we begin to take out our ICD and DSM criteria and start diagnosing people and advising treatment,
Yes.
are we actually doing them a service? Have we paused and thought? That somatoform disorder, that depression, that personality disorder, the individual or the family or the community was possibly taking care of in a semi-formal manner.
Right. Right.
See,
Absolutely. In some
now
ways.
we give them a Western label and say this is a disorder. You need treatment. So one part is this. It's a very delicate nuanced balance, like I've been saying. We'll have to have, as a profession, as a society, the tendency, no conscious or unconscious on our part, to keep psychologizing everything is very dangerous, especially in these times. We need to recognize that people will take care of themselves. To answer your question specifically, does everybody necessarily need us, professors of psychiatry and big academicians? No, they don't.
Yes.
Pardon me, do they even need you and your colleagues of, clinical psychologists and high five, very qualified, experienced therapists? No, maybe they don't. Majority of the people, 4 levels. One is self-help. Second is informal or semi-formal help that they get from family and friends and the camps which are organized. Third level, yes, they need counseling, some formal support. Fourth level, they need specialist help that you or I at Gangaram or Divas provide. So let's trust the resilience and the family and community support mechanisms for majority.
Right.
The delicate part, to keep coming back to it, is for everybody, for oneself or for friends and family, to recognize when somebody goes beyond that. If the distress is unexplained and far too long or disproportionate, if there are biological function disturbance, if there are repetitive interpersonal issues and problems,
right, sir,
and disproportionate, most importantly, like you hinted, if there are suicidal thoughts or ideas. So those indicators for seeking professional help. Can I also say here that, and one of your questions, I'm sorry, I'm perhaps jump starting.
No,
the question that you had sent to me was also, are the government programs dealing to it? And you asked me somewhat. The National Mental Health Program has been there. That was initially more on psychiatric disorders. Fortunately, in last few years, it has enlarged itself to include school mental health, suicide prevention, and the softer issues. What is very nice, I must say, again, at least in intent, is that the Ministry of Health has set up a task force with NIMHANS and a few of us others as members for psychosocial care in this epidemic period. Okay. So there is actually a task force that's going to formulate advisories and send it out to states, state governments and the agencies of the state government to focus not only on the psychiatric disorders, which of course we will talk about, medication, those who require treatment, but also talk about what you and I are saying, without being too intrusive.
Right.
In fact, if we can be unobtrusive and help the community and the families seek their support, the mechanisms that we can bring out for people to help themselves.
Yeah, because we need to make them self-sufficient and also self-aware on all of that.
Absolutely.
So we have a nice question here
yes.
where the person is saying that, Doctor, what model of psychosocial support can we continue to provide to the vulnerable groups? So good to hear about the work in Delhi. We are in a small way reached out to 10,000 people in April, June, just providing phone counseling for the poor. So there are a lot of people who are actually doing that. So that's a good question.
Yeah. What we did in those temporary shelter homes are psychology, social work colleagues and psychiatrists joining in, actually in a secondary role, frankly, was sit and talk to them. One, give them the reality context of the epidemic and the infection. What you have raised, and sorry, I didn't answer that, to flatten the curve of emotional distress, and I'll come back to that. Yes. We missed that. But at that point of time, it was sharing with them the international emerging experience of how helpless the entire human race is and how all of us need to live with the reality of this uncertainty.
Right.
One. It's amazing how once they have been, and this is important, all this talk and support may not have helped, we are very aware, if their basic needs were not taken care of.
Sure, absolutely.
If they didn't have a bed, if they were not sure of the means, if they didn't have a roof over their head, none of this can work. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy.
True, true.
But once that had been done by the administrative local units, our talks with them was one about the reality of the larger situation, how all of us can only best adapt to that reality with whatever coping we can and support each other for whatever they are going through. You know, so the basic needs being taken care of, honest, realistic appraisal of, very often, ever so often, you will all appreciate in the initial 5 to 6 weeks of those 8 to 10 weeks, almost, and I went to quite a few of these visits with my colleagues. It was such a learning experience. Many of them would say, Dr. Saab, leave all that aside. Understood. Tell me, when are you going to send me home?
Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. And you say, look, buddy, we don't know, nobody knows. We'll have to wait till these things settle down. The administrators are taking everything into consideration. They are planning it. They have begun planning it. But I do think that that is the kind of, and the mindfulness techniques that you all use besides the CBT, Roma, is always good. I forgot to mention something that I should miss. Flattening the curve of emotional distress, I do think majorly depends on what I have once or twice in last few weeks called as behavioral vaccine.
Very good term again. You just
Till we get the biological vaccine or the vaccines. But even after we get the biological vaccine or the vaccines, there is going to be a need for behavioral vaccines.
Excellent term, sir.
First of all, a realistic appraisal and acceptance of the larger situation. 2, how can I contribute to my own safety and safety of people around? Selfish, self-oriented. 3, what is my social responsibility and how, like everybody has said since March, how for the first time we are realizing that we are all one family, larger humanity, you know? So that realization and acceptance by the people. And then the whole issue of how do I deal with the distress that is emerging out of all these obligations. I mean, I can't go to a PVR, I can't go to a cinema hall, I can't go to a restaurant and sit down and have a drink or a meal. Obviously, it's distressing. You know, most importantly, like I've said once or twice, at least the way I have looked at it at 65, working in a hospital every day, all this period, is I don't know, and I'm sorry if this sounds
no, sir, it's
a
not
little provocative or disturbing. None of us in 7 billion population on this earth, or 7.2 or whatever, knows how many of us are going to see the year 2022.
Yes, that's
By
absolutely.
now, the spread has been so wide, it could be any one of us, really.
Yes.
Right? Hopefully, recovery rate is great. So that's the other behavioral vaccine that we need to hammer. That recovery rate is good and recovery depends on you. But the chance remains. Now, what can I do or what can anybody do? Forget position, forget training, forget psychology background, psychiatry background. What can any human being do? I can only take all the precautions that I should and I can take. And beyond that, keep doing what I can. In case I'm not around, I would have had the satisfaction of at least having done what I should do.
Excellent. Well said, sir. This is
and if I live on, it'll be even double or triple the pleasure. And say, I was part of that solution. So like it is said, it's very easy to be, I'm sorry for the cliche, it's very easy to be part of the problem. It's more important to be part of the solution. And if ever there was a time in human history where every living human being had to think of being part of the solution, it's now.
absolutely very well said, sir. You've actually used such terminology that all of us are completely, absolutely mesmerized by that terminology that you've used, sir. And you've kind of raised a few questions in our minds also. And
Yes.
I think I'm going to ask the listeners if they have any questions, who ask the questions. And there are lots of comments over here, lots of compliments here for you, sir.
Okay.
And you can see them also.
I'll
Madhu,
try.
you are also here. Madhu, you want to ask some questions?
No, because I think I've been, I must say, Dr. Desai adds so much of hope. So for me, whenever he speaks, all his webinars are very professionally done, but he always ends on a very hopeful note. So for me, that's very important. In the middle of the pandemic, also, we've gone through so much, but I've always found that whenever Sir speaks, is always with so much hope and that we'll find a way out. So for me, that's what stays always.
Thank you, Madhu.
Can I also say thanks, Madhu. Madhu, Roma, you might or might not know too well. He's a very, very dear, sincere friend of mental health and IMAS and SMH.
Am I aware, sir?
But the thing that prompts my thought about what Madhu said is, and that relates to some of your questions. Is there going to be a psychiatric pandemic? I'm almost certain no. Is there an emotional, psychological epidemic or pandemic right now? Yes, there is. Is that going to continue for too long? I think not. In some parts of the world, we will deal with it quicker and well. Having said that, what is the opportunity? The opportunity is for, like you and I both said, Roma, and like some comments said, to overcome the stigma of mental health. Hopefully in the new normal, so-called new normal or so-called hybrid new normal that will emerge after 2022, the hybrid new normal, we should have largely overcome the stigma of seeking help.
Right.
Now, since right now all of us are going through distress and difficulty and anxiety, hopefully we will have come to a situation where the stigma will be much less. Two, very importantly, and this is a part of the system, and yet this is the opportunity for us to strengthen the mental health systems.
Yes.
Strengthen the mental health systems for those who do not reach that 80% because of stigma or other reasons. Those who do not reach, and I must say, my heart has always bled more for the socially marginalized homeless populations. I mean, the work in 2020 is different, but as some of you know, my teams and I have worked for homeless people and homeless mentally people since 2000. And this is the opportunity for us to make sure that those gaps in mental health services get filled in. Can we all contribute to that mental health movement, if at all? So that's what prompted my thought. Madhu has been also such a good help and support for every positive idea, and all of you. Without getting panicky, without raising the panic button, can we do a constructive part of mental health movement strengthening? Take this opportunity for that.
Right. So I'm again asking all our listeners if there are any questions, please do ask us those questions.
What Hemlata is saying,
yes.
I see that comment here. Where to, sir? Yes, genetically we are better wired and designed to bear higher levels of pressures. Definition. One is resilience. The second concept, which is not my term really, is what has been described as, Roma, you will remember, stress inoculation.
Yes, we've used this term earlier.
Right, and so we have that advantage. Let me, since we have a minute, I used to be very surprised initially when I used to visit US or, you see, forget the 2001 World Trade Center, and before that, in the 20th century, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, every part of the society, but certainly airports, it was amazing to see how it used to work.
I made
Absolutely.
for them, they're hanging on the rods here in the room.
Sorry.
So,
Somebody's mic is on.
That's okay.
in the bathroom, na? And
My surprise used to be, if and when one flight got delayed, the lady at the counter and her managers were totally lost.
Yes.
I mean, as many of us will remember, forget now, 80s, 90s, में Indian airport पे अक्सर होता था कि भाई फ्लाइट डिले हो रही है, उन्होंने थोड़ा खाना सर्व कर दिया, 2-4 घंटे बैठे, फिर रात में फ्लाइट गई. Now this is not the best part of the story, but initially I was very surprised and say, this so well organized society, why are they not ready for contingencies? But I realized later that's because their systems are so smooth, at least were. They are not in 21st century by now. But at least late 20th century, they were so smooth that they actually used to have a problem if anything went out, and they never knew what to do. So for systems, for individuals, for societies, this whole flip side of the repetitive, difficult experiences is that you get used to it.
Yes, you get
You get used to it, your psychological and physical systems kind of, and you know how to support each other.
Yeah. And there's another question here.
Sure.
Vanita is asking, my question is how and what can we do to develop strategies to cover digital divide for taking care of mental health needs?
That's a good one. And you had also raised the earlier issue of telecounseling that somebody raised. Like we were saying before the session started, this telecounseling, I think, has a lot of class issues and access issues. No need to say more about that. It occurred to me in one of the webinars that if some of us remember, in the 1980s, when the Doordarshan network came up new, there used to be these community television sets.
Yes, yes, they were.
Okay. Even in urban area,
yeah,
right? Villages, definitely. We all remember, we used to go to that one uncle's place in the apartment or the society who had a television, Sunday evening film.
Having gone for the Asian Games, you know, where
Right.
we didn't have television and we were seeing that.
So why is it not possible for us to conceive? And I'm no big policy guy. I mean, I'm sure people think and plan much better. My thought is, besides the strategies to make digital access available to individuals, why is there not a possibility of considering, and if philanthropy organizations can actually take it up and say, let's have community laptops or desktops available. Nobody, at least in those areas, requires it for 24/7.
Yeah, true.
Second, I think again the government is well aware of this. The digital divide has been a reality, has and only become much sharper now. The mobile telephone revolution and the smartphone revolution, I do think, and I may be ill-informed about this, has kind of bridged that gap quite a bit. And so really the digital divide and the issues of access might be less than they might have been 8 or 10, 15 years ago. And yet, more philanthropy, more digital access through education institutions, more community access to centers.
Yes, and I have someone saying that public Wi-Fi and free Wi-Fi and the
Yes, Vandita is, yeah.
Vandita, you said it very well. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think we are coming to the end of the session. We've probably gone way ahead. I would like to just say
It
thank you.
is so good, yeah. Our friend, our colleague from IBASU went and settled in Punjab. He said, can CBSE start class teaching through Doordarshan? There has always been that channel, remember?
Why not? Why not?
Yeah. And there is, let me share, one of my very dear friends is actually doing a series of shows there, DD Science. The entire new channel like DD News and DD National and DD India, and you know. So DD Science hopefully will kind of do that.
Very good. So all compliments coming for you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. Thank you so much. And I can ask everyone to just switch on their videos so we can take some
Yes, please.
some pictures so that we'll have some good memories for everybody. Yeah, that'll be really nice. So Rajiv, are you going to be doing that? Thank you so much, Renu Kishore ma'am. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Amit ji.
Ajay, yes, Dr. Desai, it was really nice.
Yes, sir.
It was very, very good, Dr. Desai. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Pleasure, sir. Pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Desai.
Pleasure, ma'am.
Very revealing, doctor. Very revealing, very insightful, and a big
Good
learning
stuff.
for all of us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul Popli, for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I heard Dr. Desai speak so positive and so well.
Terrific session. Terrific.
Every day, every time
Terrific
we get
session,
to
sir.
learn a new
Hinaji,
thing.
thank you.
We feel that we are very lucky to have Mr. Desai on the session today. So we get to learn so much new and so much of positivity he has.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir.
Your terminology is wonderful.
Learned a lot, sir. Thank you.
Choice of terminology is wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Rahul, sometime, Rahul, if you can sometime convince the rest of the group, even if you have a panel, to talk about the youth of today in the pandemic and its effect on the next human force.
Yeah.
Dr. Desai, this knowledge series is going to continue. And we're planning to do it either every week or every 2 weeks.
Great, sir.
This is a wonderful topic, and we'll organize and, of course, take
Absolutely, sir.
others. So the next round that we are bringing up with is actually conversations with CEOs on employee emotional health, with
Okay.
human resources professionals, and indeed we're hoping to do panels with ordinary people. I mean, these are all experts and leaders, but ordinary people in how they're feeling. So this knowledge series will continue. We'll keep you informed, and we'll be delighted if all of you could make time to join. It will be always on Wednesday at 5 p.m. So that's
Most of you, it occurred to me during the chat and I kind of lost it. Amitji, Roma, other friends, most of you might remember that book, The Road Less Traveled.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It seems that now is one more time in human history when that needs to be followed.
Actually, Dr.
Absolutely.
Desai, it's almost like this road has never been followed before after this month's influenza. This road is completely new. And I don't think only after 100 years that we have got this new road. I was just talking to somebody yesterday and I said, well, at this time last year, could we have said that next year is going to be like this? We had absolutely no idea. And now we are in a completely different world.
Yes.
So thank
Thank
you
you.
again, everybody, so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Desai, and we'll continue with that series. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do let us know.
Thanks so much. That was wonderful.